All right, let's just wait. Okay, we have a couple of people already on board.
Great. We'll give it a few seconds and then start the intro.
Sounds good.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the 12 p.m. info session for the Solar EV Co-op for Richmond. My name is Aaron Such. I'm the Mid-Atlantic Region Director for Solar United Neighbors. We're a nonprofit organization that helps communities go solar, join together, and fight for energy rights. I am joined by my colleague, Sucrit Mishra, who will be presenting the technology part of the presentation. And then myself, I will go over how the co-op works and the economics. We're also very happy to be joined by our partner organization, League of Conservation Voters, Catherine Setero. And she's going to go ahead and give us a little bit of an intro about the League and what they do and why they're a valued partner for our co-op. So Catherine.
Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine, and I'm here to represent the League of Conservation Voters as a proud partner of Solar United Neighbors in this solar co-op project. LCV is an environmental nonprofit group that advocates for sound environmental laws and policies, holds elected officials accountable for their votes and actions, and elects pro-environment candidates. The Climate Action Team in Richmond also plans events around environmental issues and works with volunteers to engage them in the legislative and electoral process. They're currently working on several campaigns for the election and welcome interested volunteers who would like to give any bit of time to the cause of electing environmental champions in Virginia. If you're interested in helping with this work, please contact Devin Keller at the email address that I will put in the chat. We are so excited to partner with Solar United Neighbors because we believe that shifting to clean energy sources is one of the most important ways that we can tackle the climate crisis, and are excited that you all are interested in being a part of that movement. Thanks for joining today, and thank you, Sun, for letting us be a part of this wonderful group.
Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, just as a note too, the League of Conservation has been a valuable partner on many different things that we've done, not only here in Richmond and Hampton Roads, but also in our policy work. So we're really grateful for your all's efforts in helping us support this project. I'm going to go ahead and give a quick intro about what to expect and some housekeeping, then we'll turn it over to Sucrit. So we're all pretty fluent in Zoom. The main thing is to submit questions anytime in the chat box. So this is going to be meant to be an interactive webinar. So if you do have questions, and likely you will, please enter them into the chat. Either myself or Sucrit will get back to you. And after each section, we will stop to pause for questions. So if you do have a question, please feel free to go ahead and ask that in the chat, and we can go ahead and do that. So I think going on to the next slide, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sucrit. Go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you for the introduction, Aaron. And yeah, welcome to our very first webinar for the Richmond Co-op. If you're interested in the co-op itself, welcome aboard. This is the right place to be. If you're just here to understand the basics of solar technology, the co-op work we do, and the basics of solar economics, welcome aboard as well. So to just give you a quick introduction, or how we got started in a nutshell, the person that you see here on the right is our executive director, Anya Schoolman. And back in 2007, her son watched this documentary in school, which was pretty popular back then. It was called The Inconvenient Truth, had to do with climate change. He got really inspired by it. And he got interested in how one can go about installing solar at a residential level. They did their research. They realized how tedious it is and how pricey it is. In fact, on average, compared to what we have today, solar was almost 3 or almost 4 times as pricey back then. And they also realized how tedious it was. They did their due diligence, decided to form their very first co-op back then. It was made up of 45 members. And it was based in this neighborhood here in the district in Mount Pleasant. And it proved to be successful. And the work that they did back then basically serves as a blueprint for the work that we're doing across 12 states in the country today. And we continue to expand that good work. And besides the work that we're doing in our co-ops, there are other ways to engage. So I'll leave this stuff for later because the bulk of the presentation is based around the co-op work. But if you already have a new or existing system, which you have questions about, you need help with, we do have a devoted Go Solar team. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us at any point of time, and we're happy to answer them at no additional cost to you or refer you to the relevant person who can answer this. Besides that, you can join us for any of these webinars or one-on-ones that we do regularly. And before COVID hit, we used to do this in person, but right now, most of it is virtual. So we do this from time to time, and we'll be glad if you can join us for one of these sessions. And lastly, just fighting for our energy rights. So any of the issues that involve net metering, expanding the rights of solar for homeowner associations, this is where you guys come in. We do the work for you and we vouch for these issues, and we cannot do this without the support and the traction that like-minded folks such as you provide on a regular basis. So now that you know what our organization does, what we're all about, just a quick 101 on how basic solar works. And these are the two most common forms. The picture that we have here on the bottom is an example of a solar thermal system, which is basically harnessing or using the sunlight that it receives, using that energy to heat air or water within the household or around it. It can be used for bathing purposes or heating up your swimming pool in the backyard. As savvy as this is and interesting as it is, the bulk of the presentation and what we'll be focusing on will have to do with the solar PV systems or rooftop solar, which you see over here, which is also converting solar energy into a usable form of electricity. And the rest of the presentation will be based around this. So in terms of solar technology, you see that solar system on your rooftop. These are what the individual panels look like themselves. When you walk around your neighborhood, you might come across these systems, and you'll never just see one individual solar panel. They're usually a group of them, and it's what we call a solar array or a congregation or a group of these panels. In terms of sizing or dimensions, on average, these panels are 3.5 by 5.5 feet long. In terms of capacity or the power they produce, that's what we measure in watts, or how much power that they have the potential to produce. It ranges anywhere from, on average, 250 watts upwards of 400 watts. But again, it depends on who you're working with, which installer you're working with, and what your options are. And we'll go into more detail on this later on. The picture on the left that you see here are individual panels themselves and the specific materials that they're made up of. Really interesting stuff, but don't really want to go into the details of this. And we'll be keeping it more bare bones and more surface level when it comes to these panels. So now that you know what a system looks like, these are some of the individual components when it comes to these solar systems. Generally speaking, these panels don't just go on your rooftop. They need some kind of a medium or some kind of system which they're installed on, and that goes on your rooftop. That's done to preserve the integrity or the physical structure of the roof and also of the panels themselves. And it's what we call a racking system. So the example that you see here on the left side, this is an example of an asphalt shingle roof. And these are one of the more common roof types that we see here in the DMV region. And solar is not just restricted to this. There are a variety of roofs that installers work on. Some of them include a TPO rubber membrane roof, a standing metal seam roof. It could be a flat roof. So there are tons of options out there. The only exception when it comes to roof types would be a slate roof. Some installers are open to working on them, albeit at an added cost. The proposals that you might receive might be a bit more pricey, simply because slate roofs are not as ideal. They're a bit more complex, and not every installer is too keen to work on them. But that's just a heads up. And then the picture that you see here on the right are what we call inverters. So once these panels, harness the sunlight and they convert it into what we call DC or direct current, that's not usable for your household, and that's where the inverters come in. The DC power goes through these inverters, and that's where another conversion takes place. It gets converted to AC power or alternating current, and that's usable for your household. What you really need to understand here, and what's important here, is that all these processes are taking place instantaneously. The conversion on your rooftop, that energy is being converted instantaneously. When it goes through the inverter, that conversion and that consumption of that electricity is taking place instantaneously. So there's no lag time when it comes to this. And to just to get a bit more specific about the inverters, there are a couple of models out there or examples out there. The more basic one, which you might have heard of, is called the string inverter, more ideal for rooftops which do not have any trees or shading around them. But the more up-to-date and more common models that we have seen in our co-ops being offered by installers, and the more popular ones are microinverters or DC optimizers. These are more ideal and more up-to-date and more state-of-the-art. You don't have to make this decision yourself. The installer will walk you through these processes. But just a heads up, it's not just one inverter. There are other examples out there. Let's see. So now that you know what some of the basic components are like, these are some of the more common terminologies that you should be familiar with or something you should know before you start speaking to installers or any other experts out there in the solar niche. The first term is kilowatts. They're abbreviated as kW, and they more or less define the system size or how much power a panel or an individual panel can provide at any point of time. And for example, what you see here is a solar array made up of 12 individual panels. Each of these panels has a capacity of 250 watts. You multiply that by 12 panels, that gives you a total system size of 3000 watts or 3 kilowatts. That's your system capacity. The second term, kilowatt hours, that you see here, abbreviated as kWh, well, this is what you see on your energy or electricity bills. Anything that you're billed by the utility provider or any other person, that will be evaluated in kWh. And this more or less defines how much electricity or power you're consuming over a specific amount of time. So those are the two most common terms you should be knowing. And on average, here in the DMV region, most homeowners install anywhere from a small system size of 3 kilowatts. It can go up to 12 kilowatts and beyond. But again, it depends on tons of factors, which we'll be going over, but also your goals. What are your objectives? Are you looking to offset a small chunk of your electricity needs, all of your electric bill, and some other factors? But again, this is something we'll be going more into detail into later on. So you know some of the individual components, how solar power works. This is what it looks like in terms of a schematic or on a diagram. Basically, the solar process on residential systems is broken down into 4 basic steps. The first step that you see here is where the panels are receiving the sunlight, they're converting the sunlight into DC or direct current. Once that conversion takes place, it then goes to the inverter, where another conversion takes place. Like I said before, it gets converted from DC to AC or direct current to AC current or alternating current. And once this conversion takes place, it then goes into your electric panel. And that basically works like a distribution system. Wherever you will be needing electricity or power in your household, it will be distributing or feeding that power in as most efficient manner as possible. And the last step is where any of the excess power that you're not using at that point of time or is not, you're not actually requiring it then, it does not actually go to waste. It goes back to the grid. And that's where the concept of net metering comes in. So net metering, in essence, is the difference between the power that your system is generating versus how much you're consuming at any specific point of time. This is done on an annual billing cycle and evaluated in terms of daily or seasonal surpluses, depending on the purchasing agreement or the agreement that you have with the utility provider. And again, this depends or varies from person to person. Depending on your system size and other factors, you're effectively offsetting a small percentage of your electricity needs, maybe all of your electricity needs in their entirety. And then there are people out there who are actually oversizing their system to compensate for, say, any additional appliances you might have in the long run. You might be buying an EV, might need it for charging purposes, and you're basically oversizing the system. But again, it's different from person to person and what your requirements are. And these credits are evaluated on a one-to-one basis. Whatever your system provides or produces, you're compensated for that on a one-to-one basis. So one thing you should know or understand is that at any point of time, everyone is grid tied to the system itself, or everyone is grid tied at any point of time. And one of the downsides of that is During any instances where the electricity grid or the power grid goes down, the solar system also shuts down as a safety mechanism. So if there is an outage, those panels which are interconnected to the inverter, as a safety feature, they're shut down simply because you don't want any excess power going back to the grid where some maintenance work is going on. And so if that is shut down as a safety mechanism, you're not actually, or your system is not actually producing any power during that point of time. And that's where a battery backup or these battery storage systems are relevant and really useful and something you might want to consider. If you have a battery system that's interconnected to your panels, even when the grid is down and there's maintenance work going on, you can use that battery as a backup to fuel or power up any basic appliances in your household. And that's where it comes in to be really useful. So again, it's useful during frequent utility outages. If you have any critical energy needs in your house which can never go offline, especially medical equipment, really useful. Or if you just want to be prepared for any emergency situations or disasters, this is a relevant or useful option. Another benefit is you can utilize advanced utility rates. Those peak times where you're billed or charged more for the consumption of electricity, if you really know that, that's where you can utilize this battery system, just a consideration. So those are some of the upsides or benefits of having a battery backup. But again, some of the downsides are, it is a complex system, could require some kind of maintenance in the long run, just something you should, just a heads up on that. And it is an added cost on your solar installation. So besides the installation of the panels themselves, on average, it's an added cost of anywhere from 10 to 15 grand, depending on whatever you're installing or whatever model you have or whoever you're working with. So that's another consideration. But if you have any questions about this, we do have resources on our website. And my colleague will be dropping some resources about this in the chat section. So you've seen the solar system, how it works, all those individual steps. What actually makes a good site for a solar installation on a residential rooftop? Well, it comes down to these three factors. These are the most important considerations. The first one, the picture that you see over here, which has to do with the orientation of the roof. The most ideal direction would be a roof facing into the southern direction. We live in the northern hemisphere. We're tilting into the equator. We're facing into the southern direction, into the equator. And that's why any roof face that faces the southern direction, it's the most ideal for any installer. Having said that, if you do have roof fronts facing the eastern or western direction, they're just as fine. I mean, they're still economically viable. They're still doing the job for you, and they're still ideal for solar. The only exception when it comes to directions is the northern direction. If you don't have any other options and you have a roof front facing the northern direction, it will still not be recommended. And that's tilting away from the equator. That's the only direction we do not recommend. The second factor, it has to do with shading. If you do have any trees or shrubs or what have you around your rooftop, they're pretty high and they're casting excessive shade during the peak times of the day, your roof might not be a good candidate for rooftop solar or residential solar. If you feel like you're on the edge about this, or you feel like you fall into the gray zone about this, don't make any assumptions. If you have questions, reach out to our team. You can reach out to us at any point of time. We can survey your roof and let you know if you're a good case for solar. And if you're still unsure, it always helps to just reach out to at least a couple of installers. They can do a survey and they'll let you know if the shading on your roof is too excessive or if your roof is still good for solar. The last factor has to do with the dimensions of your roof. In terms of a specific number, installers look for at least 200 square feet of open space, minimal disturbances or obstructions. You can have chimneys or dormers or what have you, as long as they're not causing too many obstructions, as long as you have enough open space, your roof is still good or ideal for solar. And just another consideration to have, if you do have an old or aging roof that would require maintenance within, say, the next 5 to 10 years, we recommend that you get that roof repaired or changed before the solar installation itself or parallel or along with the solar installation. We don't want you getting into this scenario or this case where you get the panels installed and 5 to 10 years, you need to get the roof repaired, which means the team has to come back, deinstall the panels, fix the roof, and then install the panels again. It's not ideal. It's an added cost on you. So just another consideration. So some frequently asked questions when it comes to residential solar systems, warranties. On average, most installers provide a warranty on the panels themselves of 25 years. And in terms of the longevity or how long the system lasts, that's one of the benefits. This is a long-term investment. These residential or these solar systems, they just sit there, they're doing the bulk of the work for you, require minimum maintenance. The panels, generally speaking, have a lifetime, or they have a lifetime of anywhere from 25 to 30 years. The inverters, if it's a string inverter, it usually has a lifetime of around 10 years, so you might need to get it changed. But the micro inverters or what have you, they have a similar lifetime to the solar systems themselves. When it comes to homeowners insurance, generally speaking, your premiums should not be affected, or they should not be increasing when you're considering solar. Just let your provider know that you're going solar. They will give you tons of options and let you, evaluate what your options are. But generally speaking, they should not be increasing. Maintenance, like I said, it's an immobile system sitting there doing the bulk of the work, requires minimal maintenance for the first 25 to 30 years. If there is some sporadic weather, if you do have some snow on your rooftop or on those panels, we don't recommend that you go on top and try and clear it. Those panels actually have a dark color to them. Once the sunlight hits it, helps with the melting process. It does minimal, it causes minimal obstruction to your production value. So the solar panels are well equipped for any of this stuff. When it comes to homeowner associations in the DMV region, generally speaking, they cannot prohibit you from going solar or restrict you from doing so. If you do run into any issues regarding this, just let them know that you're going solar and you can weigh your options. But generally speaking, they cannot prohibit you or stop you. Lastly, if you live in a historic district, such as some folks do in Washington, D.C., it is done on a case-by-case basis. It is a bit of a tricky process, but generally speaking, as long as the panels are not installed on the roof face facing a public viewpoint or a public sidewalk, you should be fine. But this is not something you have to figure out by yourself. This is something the installer will work with you. They will adhere to the code and they will walk you through the whole process. But again, these are just some of the questions our team receives. If you do have other questions, you can reach out to our Go Solar team at any point of time. And I believe Aaron will be dropping that email or what have you in the chat section. So when we started out our co-ops, the focus was more on residential systems, those systems fueling or providing the necessary power for the appliances in your household. In recent years, we added another supplement, which has to do with the EV chargers and EVs in general. You're basically integrating those EV chargers through the solar system, and you're getting those panels to power up your EVs or charge them at no additional cost to you. And this is an added or second component to our solar co-ops. Just a quick 101 on what the EV chargers look like. They usually come in three forms: the most basic level 1 charger, the more common level 2 chargers, and then there's a Tesla fast or DC fast chargers. We'll be focusing more on the level 1 and 2 chargers. For starters, level 1's pretty basic. They require a 120 volt outlet, which you can find anywhere in your household. The only downside is the charge time. So on average, they provide a charge of 5 to 6 miles per hour, which as you can see is pretty slow. And that's where the level 2 chargers come in. More ideal, more up to date, more state of the art. They usually require a 240 volt outlet. You can't install this on your own nor find it in most common places. You will need a professional electrician to help you with this. Depending on the model that you have, level 2s provide a charge of anywhere from 10 miles up to 30 miles per hour. Again, depends on the model or brand you have. Generally speaking, in our co-ops in recent years, we have seen the Juice Box, Clipper Creek, and then Siemens also had their own option for the EV charger. But there are other options out there on third-party sites. If you're interested in it, you can do your own research and bring it to the attention of the electrician, and they'll walk you through the process. Another option when it comes to EV chargers is the option of getting it networked. When you get a network, you have access to lifetime data, access to time of use rates. You can better understand when it's ideal to charge your EV at minimal cost to you. And that's where, a network charger comes in. That's just a consideration, but it has a lot of benefits. In terms of warranty, these chargers have an average warranty of 3 years. And then the workmanship or whoever is installing this has their own warranty. So there are two branches or two options when it comes to warranties: the chargers themselves and the person working with you. Couple of examples of level 2 charging taking place. The picture on the left that you see here, it's in a public or commercial setting, 2 Chevy Volts, and this is a pedestal mounted system. The one on the right, that's a residential system. It's a wall mounted system. And again, when you are considering the infrastructure and which charging option you want to opt for, this is something the electrician will walk you through. They will assess your property and they'll let you know what's most ideal for you. But just to further elaborate on that, when it comes to install considerations, it can be done in an interior setting if you have access to electric works, everything's close by, and that's more suited, or in an exterior setting, whatever is more ideal, the installer or the electrician will let you know. It can be a wall-mounted or pedestal-mounted system or pedestal system, depending on a lot of factors and whatever the experts tell you. When it comes to electric servicing, make sure it's accessible and that electric panel or your system is able to provide a service of anywhere from 30 to 50 amps at any point of time. In terms of the chargers themselves, they usually come in two common forms or models. There's a more universal model, which is the J1772 model. Tesla has its own model, but if you do want to convert that, they do provide adapters, but these are the two most common options. Again, just as I said, networking capability, nice addition to have, something you might want to consider if you really want to have access to lifetime data and some of the other benefits, just a consideration. Cord length, this is really important and something a lot of people take for granted. Make sure you survey your site, you know where everything's set up, and you can make the necessary investments in the cord length. That cord is made up of copper wiring. It's really pricey. You don't want to fall into a case where you have it installed and then you realize that it's too short or it doesn't really reach your EV. So something you really want to factor in. Publicly accessible, that's a nice supplement if you want to have access to commercial charging or what have you in a commercial setting. That's another consideration. And lastly, does it look cool or is it visually appealing? Keep in mind, just like panels, this is a nice supplement or addition to have to your home. And this is something you'll be looking at every day. So just make sure the installation's done the right way and it's visually appealing. In terms of costs, the units themselves on average are anywhere from $500 to $700. But again, depending on your budget or what your preferences are, you can find something on the lower end on third-party sites. Depends on your preferences and other factors. The installation itself, it's anywhere from $500 to $2,000 or even beyond, depending on whether you have access to the electric works on your property, whether any other additional work such as trenching or any other electric work has to be done. It might add to your costs. So that is quite a wide range. And if you sum them all up, your total costs come anywhere from $1,000 to $2,700. But again, depends on the person, their property. It can be higher than that range that's been provided over there. So you have seen the solar system. You've seen how the solar system works. You know how EV chargers work. How do our co-ops work in general? Well, basically, we are trying to, through our co-op work, we are addressing any of those issues which come with group pricing. The bigger the co-op, easier it is to attain bulk purchase pricing, and the more ideal or economical those price quotes will be from the installer who's working in the co-op. Besides the cost factor, from the day you join the co-op to the day you sign the contract, get the system installed, and even beyond, our Go Solar team will be there in the backdrop, happy to answer any questions you might have. We'll be the middle person between you and the installer. You have any questions, any technical issues, anything else, you can reach out to us at no cost or additional cost. There's no additional cost to joining the co-op or any other part of that. That's another benefit of our co-ops. And lastly, the co-ops are open in that specific geographic region to folks who live there, any businesses, small businesses which are operating there, and nonprofits. And just to wrap up the first part of this presentation or this webinar, the co-op is usually, on average, anywhere from 6 to 8 months. The first couple of months is where we open the co-op, we're spreading the word, letting everyone know that, hey, there's a co-op going on over there. If you want to join it, you can find it on our website, and you can also spread the word about it. By the time we have at least 60 to 70 members in that co-op, that's when I would say in the third month, we let people or the installers in the region know that the co-op is official, we're accepting bids, and we launch or issue an RFP on behalf of the co-op members. We invite bids. Once we have enough bids from installers, we run a selection committee. The selection committee is made up of the co-op members, and they get to pick an installer depending on their preferences, which specific model they're looking for, what their budget is. So they get to make the decision. Once an installer is picked, for the last half of the co-op, we let people know in the co-op that, hey, we have picked an installer. That's where the co-op members send a copy of their electric or utility bills, other stuff. The installer schedules a visit, a consultation. Based on the visit and their survey, they provide a customized proposal that's consistent with the co-op price. And then you get to decide if that proposal works for you. They usually give a timeline of 30 days to sign the contract, but we are flexible on that. If you like the contract, you can sign it, get the installation done. If you don't, or you just want to bide your time or wait till the next co-op, there are no penalties. You can leave the co-op at any point of time without any additional costs. Lastly, the installation itself, after you sign the contract, takes another couple of months. The installation itself of the panels takes a day or two, tops. It's just that the permitting process and some of those other things on the back end, which take a lot of stuff, which is out of our control, but that takes on average another couple of months. What do you have to do at the end of all this? Well, you've done the first part. You're over here watching this webinar. You know the basics of solar and the co-ops. If you are a really big fan of the co-op and you feel like this is something that's useful to you, your friends or family members, spread the word. And we will continue providing more consistent updates throughout the whole co-op. And if you're subscribed to the email list, which you are once you join the co-op, you'll be receiving these updates. When it comes to the RFP phase, if you want to be a part of that selection committee, you're free to do so. If you don't want to be a part of it, no worries. We'll just let you know once an installer is selected. And once an installer is selected, do your research, be familiar with the proposal that they have and what are the rates or options that they're providing. And if you really enjoy the co-op and have a great experience, just fight for the solar rights for other people, spread the word, and vouch for our work. And I think that brings an end to the first part of the presentation. Aaron, any questions for us, or any feedback?
I'm not seeing any questions. There was actually a couple regarding geography. So the greater Richmond region, all the way from Ashland in the north, Chesterfield, and to the Chesterfield to the west. It's somewhat loosely defined. It's based on where the installers will actually service. Hampton Roads would be a little bit out of our area, but if you're in doubt, just go ahead and sign up for the co-op. Again, it's free to join, and if you're a little bit out of the range, we'll let you know. I'm going to invite any other questions too about the technology. Sucrit, you really covered a lot. And before I go into and I apologize, my camera's not working, so that Sucrit, it won't let me put my camera on, but that's okay. So if there are any questions, again, feel free to post them in the chat. But just to summarize what Sucrit mentioned before, so he talked all about solar technology. This is a group that specializes in solar PV or solar electric service, solar electric producing panels. And part of joining the co-op is once you do, we'll assess your roof, make sure that it's a good fit, and then you'll get a lot of different information. So our job is to help you make an informed decision. Again, the group is no obligation to join, but we want to give you the tools so that you understand solar, so that you can make an informed decision with a lot of information. And we would hope that the co-op is a good fit, but if it's not, and we help you go solar another way, that's also what we would count as a win. So you're going to get a lot of different information. We have a ton of resources, and we're designing this so that you can make an informed decision as a consumer. And then I'm going to go into the economics of how solar pays back. But again, you can just join the co-op, learn about this. Again, the first thing that you're doing is attending an information session. Secondly, we really depend on co-op members to help us spread the word. So once you join the co-op, we're going to send you some updates, but we encourage you to tell your neighbors, your friends, post it on Nextdoor, because that's going to help us get to the next phase that Sucrit explained, which is the RFP. So the co-op works on a bulk purchase sort of a framework. And so we get about 20 or 30 people to join the group. We issue a request for proposal, an RFP, and we basically say, hey, area installers, we got about 30 people to start with. We'll probably end up with about 50 to 100. Give us a competitive price on components, a component package with a couple different panel options and inverter options. And then we're going to convene members of the group to actually select the installer. So this is a very stakeholder-driven process. We facilitate it, but it's actually group members that select the installer. And then once the installer is selected, you're going to be ready for your site visit and proposal. And those site visits are going to be conducted by the installer that's selected by the group. And you're going to get a proposal based on the co-op pricing. So you have 30 days to sign that proposal, because the group is about an 8 to 9 month process. It's not indefinite, and we get really competitive pricing. So it's not fair to ask the installers to hold out on that pricing indefinitely. And then you have 30 days to sign that proposal, go solar at the group rate. At any time, we're here to help you understand your proposal. It's really common for people to get proposals from other installers outside of the co-op, and we can help you understand that and make a decision that makes the most sense to you. And in short, going solar with the co-op is really kind of just like going solar on your own, with two advantages. You're getting the bulk purchase discounts, and you're getting support through the process from us before, during, and after the process. So we're here to help you in the beginning, during installation if you have questions, and then afterwards if you have questions about maybe a new incentive, or maybe you're having trouble contacting your installer for a maintenance issue. Solar United Neighbors is there to support. And then lastly, we like to have people that go solar join the fight for solar rights. So in 2019, or actually 2020, we passed a law that helped make it harder for homeowners associations to prohibit solar. So that's an example of where we take solar owners and leverage them for successful, here we go, my video's back. So for successful advocacy. And we're a diverse constituency, so we're not only an environmental, or comprised of environmental folks, but there are a lot of conservative people that may not be motivated by the environmental reasons, but we are strictly a constituency of people that want solar or that own solar, so we fiercely advocate for that. So I'm going to start with the next section, which is how does solar pay back, and how is it priced? So Sucrit, if you could go to the next slide, that would be great. And we can, there we go. So just a few things before we get started on this. Solar is priced by the watt, not by the panel. And that's really important, because you may see two different proposals, one that has 15 panels, one that has 17 panels. But again, it's going to be priced by the kilowatt. So whether it's a 1 kilowatt system comprised of 4 250 watt panels, or another 1 kilowatt system comprised of 3 333 watt panels, it's still going to be priced by the watt. So that's important to understand, and that's why we really try to give you those resources so that you can understand how it's priced. Solar is a long-term investment. As Sucrit mentioned, there's no moving parts. The panels are warranted for 25 years. The inverters are warranted from 10 to 25 years. And there, again, is just not a lot that can fail. Also, systems come with online monitoring systems. So when you go solar, I promise that will be your new toy. You'll look at it every day, but it's a great way to see what you're producing during the day or during the week or the year. But it's also a good way to see if there's any issues with your panels performing. And what you're doing in that long-term investment is hedging against the average residential utility rate rising. So in Dominion territory here in Virginia, here in Richmond, we've seen about a 30% rate increase in the last 10 years. That rate increase, that trajectory is going to continue to rise. So when you are producing solar power with your panels, you are hedging against the price of electricity rising. Go ahead to the next slide, please. All right. So yeah, that slide, pricing and investment. So again, probably the most common question I get is, how much is solar going to cost me? What do I need? And it's really hard to know based on the fact that I don't know what your goals are, how much energy you consume, and what you're going to try to do with it. But what I can tell you is since 2014, we've helped install about 1,000 installations, over 1,000 installations as part of our co-ops. And what we see is the following: about an average 9 to 13 year return on investment. Now, if you have a really good co-op price and an excellent site for solar, that might be below 9 years. Or conversely, if your site isn't that great or your pricing isn't that great, it could be over 13 years, but about a 9 to 10 years is what we see on average. As far as system size and costs, the average again in Virginia is about 7.3 kilowatt systems and about $15,000 for residential, but small systems can be had for well under 9,000. And a small system might work out well if you don't have a lot of electricity consumption. You just don't use a lot of electricity. Or maybe you have a small roof and you're okay with a budget system that might offset about 40 or 50% of your electricity. And then maybe you have large systems over $20,000 that, maybe you have a lot of energy consumption. You have 3 EVs, you have a very large house, you're going to need to cover it with a lot of panels. So those are some of the parameters in which it falls into. On your proposal, you should see a pretty detailed cost breakdown of what is expected in terms of your return on investment. That's really common for installers. And again, we're happy to look at any proposal, whether it's part of the co-op or outside of the co-op, and let you know if that comports with what we see, looking at those calculations. So the last slide is going to be on how solar pays back. And it's a little bit of a complex slide, but I think what's important here, again, from a customer-facing perspective, is to understand how solar is priced, how it pays back. So when I say how it pays back, what are your revenue streams? What are the ways that your system pays back? And then what are some of the cumulative savings? So if you look, what we've divided this chart into is a 4 kilowatt and an 8 kilowatt system. Again, your system might be a 7.3 kilowatt system, and it really depends on your goals or what you're, but these are here for illustrative purposes. And then what you have on the first column to your left, or the first row, is the average Virginia solar co-op price. So we get about $2.75 per watt. And this is over the trajectory of the co-ops that we've done. So if you just do some simple math, and this should be really easy for you to look at any proposal and determine, is you look at the system size in watts and then multiply it by the price per watt. So if you were to look at a 4 kilowatt system or 4,000 watt system, multiply that by the price of $2.75 a watt, you would get an $11,000 system. As well as if you were to do that with an 8 kilowatt system, 8,000 times $2.75 a watt would be $22,000. So that's your upfront price, right? And it's worth mentioning that these systems are installed, designed, and permitted by the installer. So these are turnkey systems. You really don't have to do anything on your own. The installer is going to walk you through those processes. Now, so you have your turnkey system or your turnkey system price. How are the ways that your system pays back? How do you recoup that return on investment? The first major revenue stream is going to be your federal tax credit. So this is for federal taxes. Unfortunately, in Virginia, we don't have a state tax credit. And this is if you pay federal taxes. And it's a tax credit, not a deduction. So it's a 26% value of your total system cost. So if you were to look at the $11,000 system, that 26% of that would be $2,850. And then the 8 kilowatt system would be $5,700. That's what you would file on your tax returns the year that you go solar. So if you know anybody that's an installer, chances are you're not going to see them in the month of December. That's because everybody wants to get their system installed before December 31st of that tax year so that they could file it on their taxes. So that's a federal tax credit, your main revenue stream or one of your major revenue streams. And it is applicable if you pay federal taxes. Well, a common question is what happens if, say, hey, I was partially employed one year, I just don't pay a lot of taxes this year. You can monetize that tax credit into subsequent years, into 5 years. So if you don't have a big tax liability one year, you can monetize it into years that you do up to 5. So that's a major revenue stream. Again, unfortunately, in Virginia, we do not have any state tax credits like they do, say, in Maryland. Your other revenue stream, which I'm going to skip down, is going to be your estimated electricity savings. So your electricity savings are calculated by the amount of energy in kilowatt hours that your system produces every year, multiplied by the rate in which your utility charges you for that kilowatt hour. So if the price of electricity doubles in the next 10 years, the value of the electricity of the solar that you produce is going to double as well. And that's when we talk about it being a hedge against rising electricity prices. And you can see where we've estimated a year one electricity savings at 600 for the 4 kilowatt system and at 1200 for the 8 kilowatt system. It is pretty common for installers to put a escalation rate or what they anticipate the price of electricity to rise based on the fact that it's about a 2 to 3% rise in electricity costs every year. So sometimes that's factored in. But again, your electricity savings are the amount of energy that you produce every year from solar multiplied by the rate at which your utility charges you per kilowatt or per unit of electricity. Your other and your last revenue stream is going to be a solar renewable energy credit, or an SREC. And this is kind of hard to explain, but it's actually a production-based incentive. It's based on a unit or a certain amount of energy that you produce from solar. And up until recently, we haven't had this extra credit. So in 2020, the Virginia Clean Economy Act passed. And what that did is it allowed a certain amount of energy or a certain amount of the state's energy goals to be mandated that it be produced by renewable energy like solar. And so a solar renewable energy credit is kind of like saying, a simple analogy is like you get a certain amount of a credit based on what you produce. It's as if your solar energy system was a well of water. And the solar renewable energy credit says for every 1,000 gallons of water that you produce, we're going to give you a credit that's going to help you pay back your system. And that credit is based on what's called a renewable portfolio standard, or a mandate that tells utilities, if you do not produce a certain amount or sell a certain amount of your electricity from renewable energy like solar or wind, you have to pay a non-compliance or a penalty. But instead of paying that penalty, you can pay a solar producer for that 1,000 gallons of water analogy. In fact, for SREC, it's 1,000 kilowatt hours. And what that equates to, where the rubber hits the road, is a 4 kilowatt system will on average produce about 5 SRECs a year. And currently, because of the Clean Economy Act, which Solar United Neighbors help support, those prices from what we see right now are anywhere between about $20 to $40. So if you produce 5 SRECs per year with your 4 kilowatt system, you might have an additional revenue stream of about $150. And that SREC is brokered. So 2 common brokerage firms are Sol Systems or SREC Trade. And so once you go solar, you can sign up with them and they're going to give you different options. There's different annuity payments. But what this solar renewable energy credit amounts to is another revenue stream based on the production of what you produce from your solar energy system. So at the very end, what you're going to see is how your system pays back. So remember, just to summarize, you have your upfront system cost, your system size multiplied by your price per watt, $11,000 and $22,000 example, and then your revenue streams. How are you going to pay it back? 26% federal tax credit. The good news is that next year that tax credit is also extended at 26%. And we're working nationally to see if we can get even more, more extensions on that or even a cash rebate. Your other revenue streams, again, are going to be how much electricity you produce with your solar that you don't have to buy from the utility, and then your solar renewable energy credit. And so these are typically going to be calculated on your proposals. So that's an example, again, where we're happy to help you understand your proposal, whether it's through the co-op or outside of the co-op. And you can look and see and say, okay, this is how it's going to pay back. This is the pricing, and help you make that decision that makes the most sense to you. So I know this is a lot and it's a little bit complicated. So I'm going to pause and see if anybody has any questions in the chat. I don't know if you've been fielding any, Secrete, but
Let's see. So I'm just, I see one on the regional footprint. Oh, no, I don't see any questions, to be honest.
okay. Well, if there are no questions, again, what I would encourage you folks to do is join the co-op. So when you join the co-op, very good. Alan has a really good question. We're new homeowners in our first home. When is a good time or a good house to consider? We may keep this house for a rental. So a couple things to consider. If it's a new home, the first thing that installer is going to do is ask for a copy of your utility bill. Your utility bill has a 12-month history of what you've consumed every month. So one of the challenges, if you're a brand new homeowner, you don't have that history. Some people do like to wait a couple months or, at least a season or two, so they can determine whether or not, how much energy they use, because your proposal is going to be based on how much energy you consume. So it's a little more challenging with a new house. You haven't been in it. You don't know how the usage patterns are going to be. The other question is if you're going to keep it for a rental. People do have solar on their rental homes. We've seen folks that maybe, added or tack on a little bit of a premium to the rent. If you do sell it, solar does increase the value of your home. So, even though you probably wouldn't be a good idea to go solar and then have to sell it in the next year, what we have seen is that solar panels do increase the value of a home. It makes it a little bit more marketable. So I hope those answer your questions. If not, you can shoot us an email at the Virginia team. Good question from Bryce. Do we expect solar PV technology to become more efficient and productive in the coming years? And that is in 5 to 10 years, will the panels be put on roofs producing more watts than now? The simple answer is yes. But I would say that the caveat is that the technology doesn't follow like a Moore's law kind of a curve where, for example, you buy your laptop and then 3 months later, it's obsolete almost, or the technology is doubled. And I can tell you in 2014, the panels that we were using were about 250 to 260 watt panels. Some of the more efficient ones were over 300. Now, again, in 2021, it's common to see as a base panel offering 330 watt panels. I'm going to be putting 365 watt panels on mine. Where the efficiency of the panels matters is if you have a limited roof space. So if you have plenty of roof space, you can cover it with panels, because remember, solar is priced by the watt, not by the panels. So where panel efficiency really matters is if you have a limited footprint. Say you have a small row house and you have a lot of energy. If you were to put 10 300 watt panels, you would have a 3,000 watt or a 3 kilowatt system. Well, if you were to make a higher efficiency option of 10 400 watt panels, that would be a 4 kilowatt system. So what panel efficiency does is it maximizes the performance or the energy that you can squeeze out of your roof space. Now, that 4 kilowatt system, even though it still has 10 panels, is going to be more expensive because solar is priced by the watt. You'd be paying for 4 kilowatts as opposed to 3 kilowatts. But again, the take-home message is that there's not going to be some, at least in our experience, going to be some massive jump in solar panel technology that all of a sudden the panels themselves are going to be obsolete like computers. So I hope that answers the question. That's actually a really good question. We get that quite a bit. Now, one of the things, we do have some time, And I'll get the price per watt question here in a second. The differences between panels and batteries is batteries are following kind of that Moore's law trajectory. So we anticipate in the next 3 to 5 years, battery technologies are going to be more robust, have more power, have more energy density, and chances are they're going to be a little bit less expensive. And that's driven by the electric vehicle revolution. All right, good question again. How much do we expect the price per watt to fall as demand for solar increases? It's a good question. The price per watt is following a downward trajectory, but it goes in fits and starts. It depends on component pricing. What I will tell you is that in residential installations and commercial installations, the price of solar installation is more than 50% soft cost, which means non-component cost. So that means the cost of an installer to go and acquire business, to turn in permitting, the labor that it takes to install. So one of the advantages of the co-op is that by getting a group together in a concentric geographic area, 30 to 100 people, it does reduce those soft costs. So there are some supply chain issues going on, especially there's been some discussion with what's going on with China. But I don't expect it to fall precipitously. It might stable out. It might go up. When the past administration put the tariffs on imported panels, a lot of the prices did go up slightly, but it's not a huge trajectory. And again, what I would say is I wouldn't expect a huge dramatic decrease or a huge increase. It's kind of following that fits and starts trajectory. Another really good question. These are really great.
I think that's about it.
Great. Well, we're going to go ahead before this ends. I'm going to go ahead and post the co-op link into the chat. And let me see. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. And we would encourage you all to join the co-op, and it's at no obligation. What we'll do is we'll screen your roof and give you an idea of whether it's a good fit. If you do, once you join the group, you're going to get a welcome series of emails explaining the technology. We're going to keep you updated and key milestones. And at any time, feel free to ask us questions. Additionally, we are going to ask you to spread the word. If you got a friend, neighbor, if you post on Nextdoor, if you have a work group that's interested in sustainability, we're really asking you to help us spread the word. And I think we're at 7 members right now, so we're off to a pretty solid start. And once we get to about 20 or 30, we're going to issue that RFP, and that's when the selection is going to happen and the pricing and the installer is going to be clear. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us on our lunch hour. Thank you, Sucrete. And again, thank you to League of Conservation Voters for being a fantastic partner. And so you know where to reach us, and we hope you enjoy your rest of your day and have a safe weekend. Thank you.